Thank you everyone so much for joining us and welcome to the Create the Vote Cambridge City Council Candidates Forum. My name is Marisa Molinar. I am the founder and director of Midday Movement Series, which is a grassroots dance initiative here in Cambridge, and I am a member of the Create the Vote Cambridge Committee. Today's forum offers both ASL interpretation and captioning. We are also recording today's forum, and we will be sharing it on the Create the Vote Cambridge landing page at Mass Creative. And Cambridge Community Television will be broadcasting it Thursday, October 21st and 28th at 8 p.m., and Tuesday, October 26th at 4 p.m. We're starting off this program with a land acknowledgement, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mar Parrilla, Artistic Director of Danza Orgánica and Social Justice Consultant.
Hahom Marisa, Usaweyu Daka Mar Parrilla, Daka Taino. I am Mar Parrilla. I am an indigenous Taino dance artist from Boriquen, today known as Puerto Rico. I live in Roxbury, home of the Massachusetts peoples, and I am a guest in Massachusetts territory. This webinar is being held today at Central Square Theater in Cambridge, traditional homelands of the Massachusetts peoples. Neighboring tribes include the Nipmuc and Wampanoag, to name a few. These tribes have been around for over 10,000 years, and they are still here. We acknowledge that settler colonizers forcibly removed indigenous peoples from the land where the Central Square Theater is currently located. We are on stolen land. This is native land. We acknowledge that we are here today communicating through systems, including high-speed internet and computers, not accessible to all indigenous, displaced, underserved, and oppressed peoples around the world. This continues to perpetuate a gap of inequity brought upon by modernity and coloniality. I would be remiss not to mention the current situation MIT is grappling with as it pertains to the Walker Memorial. The third president of MIT, Francis Amasa Walker, was the author of The Indian Question, a treatise that justified forcibly removing tribes from their lands and confining them to remote reservations. This is currently being brought to light. Lastly, I invite you to support and follow Native-led organizations that continue to do amazing work with and for Indigenous peoples and beyond, and that you continue to do your research on the ways you can challenge colonial narratives, support BIPOC communities, and become a true ally. You can follow me with the handle at Danza Orgánica and email me at danzaorganica@gmail.com for more information. Hahom, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that land acknowledgement, Mar. We would like to thank all the candidates for joining us today. This forum is one step towards a long-term, structured advocacy effort to ensure that arts and culture in Cambridge become a priority for the City Council. As an economic driver, a health and welfare priority, and with demonstrated successful neighborhood community building, the arts and culture sector in Cambridge is critical to the overall well-being of our city and to all those who live, work, and play here. Due to the number of City Council candidates, we will not have time for a public Q&A section for this forum, but we are inviting the audience to drop any questions into the Q&A function of Zoom. Our Create the Vote Cambridge volunteers will ensure that all questions are shared with the candidates. If you want to direct a question to a specific candidate, please make sure that you indicate this in your question. We will post answers to these questions on the Create the Vote Cambridge landing page at Mass Creative, and we'll let everyone know when the answers are available. All candidates have been sent a questionnaire that further details their position on arts and culture in Cambridge. You can find all submitted candidate responses at the Create the Vote Cambridge landing page at Mass Creative. We're dropping the landing page link in the chat right now. Tonight, we are going to provide 2 timed question periods for each candidate. Each candidate will be called upon in alphabetical order by last name. Candidates will have 3 minutes to respond in each section. Let's get started. Candidates, please introduce yourself and tell us about your track record in supporting the arts in Cambridge or elsewhere. Please cite specific projects, initiatives, or advocacy. You will have 3 minutes each to respond. If you exceed your time, I will give you a polite thank you. And if you exceed my thank you, you will be muted. So let's begin with Burhan Azim.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Burhan Azim. I'm running for Cambridge City Council for the second time. I was the runner-up in 2019, and hopefully with your supports this time, I can make it on. I'll answer the question, but I just wanted to give a little background, which I think will be very helpful. So my name is Burhan. I was actually not born here. I was born in Pakistan. And a lot of my experiences and how I view the world were shaped by that experience because when I was born, my sister was born premature. And we had months and months of medical debt from her being in the hospital for so long, more than we'd ever be able to pay off. But then my mom entered and won the lottery. But instead of it being the regular lottery, it was a Visa lottery. And I think about that moment a lot because it's literally a lottery, a 1 in 10,000 chance that kind of got me to where I am today. And so through my life, I've tried to give back and participate in the community everywhere I can. I was an EMT in Cambridge for a long time, trying to take care of, people in their most vulnerable times. And I struggled a lot with housing affordability when we first moved to the US. We couldn't really afford a rent or place of our own. So another family took us in, and the 11 of us shared this tiny 3-bedroom where we would hide in the closet whenever the landlord came because it was illegal to have that many people there. And I remember skipping pre-K and kindergarten because we didn't want to get caught coming in and out too often. My real work in Cambridge has been focused around affordable housing. I started a nonprofit that does policy work at the state level called Abundant Housing Massachusetts, which is really focused on affordable housing policy. And we work with the mayors of Salem, with the Framingham, with different cities and state legislatures, really tackling this problem. And it's something that's found a lot of appeal among very different communities across the state. One of them is Artist Impact, which has been facing difficulties of artists being able to afford rents. And I think that we were able to really work together and put together proposals and things like that because, having affordability, being able to make, Cambridge or Boston your home is kind of the first step to having a lot of these options. I know that, Councillor Mallon and McGovern, among others, have done a lot through the Arts Council and things like that, which I think they deserve a lot of credit for. I have not yet had those opportunities because I'm not yet on city council, but if I get elected to city council, I hope that I'll have the opportunity to work with you guys and contribute to the arts in Cambridge and supporting all of your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Burhan. Now we're moving on with the same question to Dennis Carlone.
Hi again. This is Dennis. A little background. I'm an architect, urban designer, studied art, architecture, city planning. I've done sculpture on my own when I considered being a sculptor. I've been a consultant to the Arts Council. We won a federal award for the project. One of the pieces was by Paul Matisse. In fact, it was in front of City Hall. It was so successful, people would play his musical fence at 2 a.m, and it had to be removed. I then was on the board of Urban Arts, which served as a consultant to the MBTA. I was the architect on the board, and I was the chair for a while as well. I was also a consultant to arts groups, doing architectural programming of their spaces, getting to know them very well. As an urban designer, I believe strongly in the dedication and the making of place. And sculpture, fountains, create a sense of place with the right architectural enclosure. And I've been advocating that my whole life. I was a consultant to the city for 30 years. I did the East Cambridge Riverfront project. That's the design of the 40 acres around the Leechmere Canal, and helped pick the art. That process was interesting, and I didn't always win, but there are a few pieces that I'm very proud of that are incorporated into that. As far as my feelings about art and culture, they're everything. urban design, which is designing city spaces and neighborhoods, is to integrate art and culture at every level. And I've always done that. I've actually participated in painting a mural facade of a building on a concrete block building that won 2 awards and made that building the user, which was a paint store, extremely successful. People came from out of town to visit it. I think there should be 2% of art on every public project. I think every public space should have an identity that art helps magnify. I think every new building, and I've tried to do this in my buildings, integrate art as much as possible as an integral piece, not as a standalone piece. These are just basic principles. I've taught architectural history and public art around Greater Boston, and I emphasize the integration of the two. So I'll leave it there, but I'm happy to answer questions later. It looks like I've called out all my notes, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Moving on with the same question to Robert Eckstedt.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robert Eckstedt, and I'm a first-time challenger for a seat. I've lived in Cambridge for 15 years, and I'm a renter. I'm running for City Council because, frankly, I love Cambridge. I'm running because I believe we have inherent problems with our current makeup of government. We're not capable of addressing the problems with the current makeup, but I can. I'm seeking everyone's vote November 2nd, hopefully number 1 vote, so that I can make this happen. I'm honored to be here attending the Cambridge Arts and Culture Forum, As candidates, we ideally try to appeal to all groups. So while I canvass, I've encountered people of all races, ages, creeds, and so on. I've leaned on my experience of listening and learning to find out what issues grip each individual group. My mission is to find out exactly what issues are plaguing the art community so that I can do whatever I can to facilitate and help. My number 1 priority, if elected, stems from our system of governance and how everything is functioned. We have a city manager who is chosen by the council and has full-scale authority over the city. This city manager has no legitimate checks to his power. What this means is that popular policies, such as municipal broadband, have just died on his desk or have not been advanced far enough. In order to make any popular, positive, good for the collective policies possible, we need to change into a mayor-council system so that the council is empowered to do the work. I want to do the work that is required to help each individual group. So when I speak to any individual group or learn what issues they face, I can actually solve. As far as my connection to the arts, I sort of joked on the questionnaire, but I'm also serious, is that I haven't really had the opportunity or time to dedicate myself to arts projects. I believe that many people in my generation are in the same boat. We want to act, we want to paint, play, sing, but we simply don't have the means or time to do so. I want to make government, our local government, a facilitator and enabler of individuals like myself and ideally other people attending this forum in order to accomplish this. My individual connection extends that I'm a writer. I've published a book and I've written extensively about gambling, poker, and sports. I've also created and hosted several podcasts, once again about sports, mainly basketball, poker, gambling, and also local politics. I wish that we had a stronger government that facilitated and enabled people like me, other individuals as well, to give them the opportunity to do more of this. Once again, I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me. And November 2nd, I'm seeking your number 1 vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see questions coming up in the chat. I'm just going to take a moment to remind everyone to please submit your questions to the Q&A as opposed to the chat so that the team can share your questions with the candidates. But continuing with our first question, I would like to invite Tanya Hicks to respond.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the committee for, inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone. Arts is definitely important. It's critical for my upbringing. Arts is what really helped me to get through life. I mean, my parents had me in dance and karate and voice lessons and anything you could think of related to the arts, just to keep my creativity flowing. I think as a challenger, this question is, is difficult to answer because we haven't been in a position where we could actually affect art in a way in which is palatable or even noteworthy to people who are on this thing, because we just haven't been in a position to have the power. But if elected, arts would definitely be number one, or one of the top things on my platform, because I feel arts are the things that we keep our youth involved to stay out of trouble. It also just works with different sides of the brain, for our creativity, and it's critical. I think, or I can speak for myself during the pandemic, music and anything that I could do live stream, those versatile challenges were great, were really critical for my mental health. On my platform currently, there's nothing about the arts because I haven't been able to, like I said, I haven't been in the position of power. But definitely, if elected, arts would be critical. So, my name is Tanya Hickson. I'm running for Cambridge City Council. I'm looking for your number one vote. Other things that are important to me are to prioritize resource equity and housing stability, food security, climate justice, and youth and young adult programming between the ages of 18 and 30. I think that's really critical. And I think also including those young folks in the arts is critical. And so, the way I can pursue these goals and achieve resource equity in our community is through bringing more accountability to the city government and leaders by engaging with traditional disenfranchised people. And the arts community is a part of that disenfranchised. I am proud of my community engagement skills and ability to authentically build relationships with young people and community members. This skill and accomplishment in true community engagement will support my work as a city councilor. When you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I, along with we, the everyday people, are tired of being on the menu. So please cast your vote in 14 days or earlier if you go this Saturday and vote me number one for Cambridge City Council. Thank you. And let's go arts.
Thank you so much. And continuing on with Alana Mallon.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to the Mass Creative and Create the Vote team for gathering us here this evening. My name is Alana Mallon, and I'm running for re-election to the Cambridge City Council. I'm serving my second term, and I'm currently the vice mayor. Fun fact about me, I'm a former clothing designer. In terms of my track record in supporting the arts, in 2019, during my first term on the City Council, I chaired the Mayor's Arts Task Force, appointed by then Mayor McGovern, to develop a series of recommendations on how our city could better support the arts organizations that call Cambridge home, and our cultural district in Central Square. Together with local artists, arts organization leaders, and city staff, we held monthly meetings for 9 months that were focused on topics such as funding, zoning, space, and more. From those meetings and those conversations, we put forward a final report with recommendations for action, and you can find that final report on my website, alanamallon.org. As a task force, we wanted to move with more urgency and made real-time recommendations to the City Council, which were then approved and acted upon. As a task force, we were able to remove the cap on the 1% of art ordinance, which stipulated that 1% of all hard construction costs were spent on on-site public art. It was set at $100,000. As a result, the Tobin School, which is now being built, will see almost $2 million spent on on-site public art. We also increased the amount of arts grants from $95,000 annually to $250,000 annually. And lastly, we put together $250,000 worth of annual funding for our cultural district, which was underfunded before. At the onset of the pandemic, when the city locked down, artists and artist organizations were hard hit. Artists lost every gig they had overnight. And so the mayor and myself, who cannot be here tonight, unfortunately, worked with the Cambridge Community Foundation to set up 2 funds, an Artist Relief Fund and a Cultural Capital Fund, which has given away over $600,000 to artists and art organizations over the time of the pandemic. Additionally, I convene biweekly meetings with our arts organizations to connect them to these technical assistance and any current health and safety guidance and more. Those regular meetings provided the city administration just how important the arts are here in Cambridge. If I'm lucky enough to be serving a third term on the Cambridge City Council, I will continue prioritizing arts and arts organizations here in the city of Cambridge. I know how important they are and what an economic driver they are in our city, and I will continue to do that work. And I hope that you give me your #1 vote on November 2nd so I can continue that advocacy for the arts and arts organizations here in Cambridge.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Mallon. Continuing with Mark McGovern.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Mark McGovern, and I'm running for re-election to the City Council. I'm the fifth generation of my family to live in Cambridge. I'm the father of 2 Cambridge Public School graduates, and my 11-year-old twins just started 6th grade at the Cambridge Street Upper School. I've been a social worker for close to 30 years with some of the most at-risk children and families in Cambridge and across the state. The issues that we so often talk about in Cambridge, affordable housing, income inequality, food insecurity, our unhoused community, substance use disorder, and equities in our schools, these are not issues that are new to me. These are issues that I've dedicated my life to addressing long before I ever ran for office. And that commitment and experience is what shapes my work on the council. I didn't run for office because I was so in love with politics, but I ran for office because I'm so in love with this community and my dedication to making people's lives better. And that's what guides me on the council. And I think my experience is important because as a social worker, my work is all about taking concrete actions that lead to tangible results in people's lives. How do we make people's lives better? I've done that on housing, income inequality, food insecurity, education, and many other areas. And I've done that when it comes to the arts as well. As the Vice Mayor mentioned, as mayor, I launched the Mayor's Arts Task Force, which was superbly led and run by the Vice Mayor. And many of you on this call participated in that process, and I want to thank you for that. And as the Vice Mayor mentioned, that has led to real tangible results, right? We have $2 million in funding that's going to go to the arts from the Tobin School coming out of a recommendation from that committee. That is significant. I worked with the BID, the Vice Mayor, the city to make sure Starlight Square got up and running and got the funding that it needed to open. And that has been an incredible addition and really saved our community in a lot of ways during the pandemic. I worked again with Councilor Mallon, Vice Mayor Mallon, to lift busker fees to make sure that our street performers didn't have the obstacle of having to pay for a permit so that they could perform, so that we could bring street performers back to our community as we lost so many of them. Last term with then Vice Mayor Jan Devereaux, and then this term with current Vice Mayor Mallon and Councilor Sabrina Wheeler, we worked to eliminate permitting fees for acoustic music performers to be able to perform without having to pay for a permit and have to get a permit. These are all tangible things that are making a difference for our artists and our arts community. On the school committee, I also work with Councilor Mallon to make sure we kept funding the arts in our schools. So I thank you. I ask for your #1 vote, and the arts are always important to me and will continue to be always important to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Continuing with Joe McGurk.
Hi, I'm Joe McGurk, first-time candidate for Cambridge City Council. Tough act to follow with Vice Mayor Mallon and Councilor McGovern. So I'm a first-time candidate, but I've been tenant bar in the city for the last 30 years. My family's been here for 3 generations, ever since my grandparents moved into Newtown Court over in East Cambridge in 1938. But it's likely I'll be the last generation to be able to afford the city. It's become so expensive, and that's one of the reasons I'm running. The main reason I'm running is that I think that the next council should have voices from those who are at risk of displacement, the lower income folks, working folks like myself, renters like myself. I think housing is my pride and born issue. Cambridge is a wonderful city. We are so fortunate that we share a lot of the same values of progressive thought. We value equality and justice and diversity, but I think that unless we address our housing issue, we will. It's a real threat to our values. Excuse me. Often now I would talk about the different platform ideas I have, but I'd like to talk about the generation after me. I have two children. Both of them are involved in the arts. My daughter is a musician, Allie McGirt. She's incredible, locally, plays locally. And my son writes a lot about arts and culture in the city, mostly about hip hop. And I know well how difficult it is for artists to make it, especially after COVID. I think that for many of us, we have taken it for granted that the incredible arts and culture scene we have in Cambridge is just there. And when we talk about housing, we talk about housing justice, we have to recognize that the folks who keep our streets clean and our cafes and restaurants staffed and our homes safe and our children taught, and the people who make our lives better by performing art in the city, they should have an opportunity to live here as well. My personal life, I haven't done a lot of advocacy for arts. I've got to tell you, the bandwidth of raising a family doesn't leave a lot. On a personal level, of course, I encourage my daughter's artwork. I lost a job one time for insisting on not charging the musicians who were incredibly underpaid for their second beer. And at a restaurant, I used to pay out of pocket to make sure a musician could play there. But I do hope to be an advocate for musicians and other artists if I'm allowed to serve. As I said, I have more than an altruistic version of that, since it would be a wonderful thing if my daughter could actually live close to the city. I look forward to learning how I can better serve the arts community. And I am really just ready to learn from all of you guys how I can do this better. That said, I hope you'll consider me for your number one vote on November 2nd.
Thank you, Joe. I'd now like to invite Patty Nolan to respond to the question.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here. Thanks for all of you on the call. It was funny when I was thinking of answering this question. And by the way, all my other positions, from what I've been working on with municipal broadband or charter or governance, you can find on my website, pattynolan.org. I want to try to stick in a few minutes because it's not that much time to the question about the arts. What I reflected on was the fact that when I got married, which was 25 years ago, we asked people to donate instead of giving us gifts to two organizations. One was a gay marriage fund with Lambda Legal Defense Fund, recognizing that we were a heterosexual couple and get married. And the other one was two local arts organizations, Dance Umbrella, which some of you may remember, because we recognized that it was critically important to our own emotional health to have been able to participate in a variety of different arts organizations. So that is a testament to how long I've been aware of how important it is to be involved with and to support the local arts. I was on the board of visitors for the Laundry School of Music before it merged with Bard College, frequent supporter of local venues, many of which are here. Our son danced with Jose Mateo Ballet Theater Nutcracker for 9 years. It greatly influenced his life. He went on to do MDC at CRLS. We regularly go to Pastimes, we went to Improv, to the ART, Central Square Theater, Celebrity Series. It was just, the reason I mention that is it's critically important. And I know everyone here knows that. It's too bad we can't spread the word more, just how important it is to understand that it's partly the economics that we have to support all these artists, because it truly is something that is a way that our own sense of self gets supported. And our kids benefited from all of that on the schools. And I'm realizing the time's running out, so I better quickly go to my major area in that. Was because I served on school committee for so long. I'm just serving my first term on city council, that it was in that venue that I was able to help increase funding, change it so schools could all have dedicated arts and music teachers so they weren't running around. They were able to get to know their students. That had not been in place before. Brought in funding for community arts groups for the first time to work with our students. It was North Cambridge Family Opera did incredible workshops in music for composing with kids, Beyond the Fourth Wall, ballroom dancing. And I think one of the most poignant things that I was able to do on school committee was to find funding for a very powerful student-driven, student-led, student-written piece of art called Our Truths, which was something that provided students with an opportunity to perform in front of the community some incredible, heartfelt and quite inspiring and literally life-changing, I think, opportunity for them to portray themselves on stage. I also brought in a national educator to work with students via spoken word. that is something I see 14 seconds left, but I have certainly been thrilled to be able to support on the city council the range of areas that we are trying to support more of our artists through the relief funds, and also as Mayor Mark McGovern and Alana Mallon talked about, the ways that we're changing our own ordinances. So I know time is up. Thank you. Goodbye, and we'll talk more in the next round. Thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Franz Pierre to respond to this first question.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? My name is Franz Pierre. Born and raised in the city of Cambridge. I'm the youngest of 12 siblings. My mother moved here in the late 70s. She had 9 kids in Haiti. Moved here, had 3 of us. She moved everybody here. So I'm not a politician. I'm a social worker. Music and art did save my life. I understand the importance of how the different structures of family, it connects you with different people. It takes you out of your element and, connects you to different things. I also been part of a music group growing up for about 18 years. I've been part of a dance group. I also been part of Salsa in the Park in Columbia Park. I went to the Heritage School where we did our origami contest. And I understand the importance of, building things with your hands so you can feel creative and, feel like you can achieve things in the world. I've been a street worker. I've been a recovery specialist, residential, DYS, after school teacher, mentor, motivator. I also have my own LLC where it's called Can I Strive? I host events where artists can actually, perform, speakers can come speak, and connect with different people. I love art. I think it's time that we give the kids in Cambridge a true chance to succeed. I think it's been too long where, our kids are flourishing, because the last time, somebody made it big in Hollywood was the Matt Damons and things like that. And I think it's too long. I think Cambridge is a beautiful place and we have way more than the opportunities to create these things. And I just think we need, somebody that understands it, somebody that comes from the environment, and somebody that can actually, engage with the kids and, show them where they need to be going.
Thank you, Franz.
You're welcome.
Next, I would like to invite Theodora Skiatis.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Theodora Skiatis, and I am a renter, organizer, daughter of small business owners, environmentalist, and labor rights activist here in Cambridge. I also come from a family of musicians. My dad has played in a band since he was in high school. My uncle attended the Berklee School of Music, and I am a singer. It has been my privilege to support the arts in Cambridge. At Cambridge Local First, where I am the executive director, I support and work in very close partnership with several arts nonprofits, including the Cambridge Community Center for the Arts, Cambridge Artists Cooperative, Cambridge Community Television, Brattle Theater, the Multicultural Arts Center, Culture House, Solicanto, Fresh Palm Ballet, Teddy Shoes, and a few others as well. In total, we have approximately 30 arts-relevant organizations as members. And as board chair to the YWCA Cambridge these last 2 years, I've worked to ensure that our arts programming is diverse. Many arts organizations like Boston Classical Sobacto and Rumbai Dimbal Dance Studio use space at the YWCA Cambridge to engage with the community. In the past year and a half, I have co-organized 3 citywide movie nights with Brattle Theater, the Vice Mayor, and Cambridge City Council, and Cambridge See the World, a nonprofit focused on bringing travel and camping opportunities to low-income and immigrant Cambridge families. For these events, we encourage residents to order food from a curated list of diverse restaurants and watch movies curated by Brattle Theater and donate to Cambridge See the World and Brattle Theater. The first iteration was an all-encompassing list of movies and restaurants. The second iteration focused on Black-owned restaurants and featured films. And the third iteration focused on immigrant-owned restaurants and international films. In addition, throughout the pandemic, I've advocated hard for our arts organizations. I shared information with dozens of arts organizations on grants that were available to them at the local, state, and federal levels, including the SVOG, or Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. I amplified our arts organizations and their fundraisers on social media and through email, helped build out websites, and brainstorm strategies for engaging with virtual audiences. I am also a proud advisory board member of the Eureka Ensemble, which nurtures social impact through music by engaging directly with communities in the greater Boston area affected by homelessness and immigration with a focus on serving marginalized youth. I'm also thrilled to have received the endorsements of several prominent figures in the Cambridge arts community, including Alan Toda Ambaras from Eureka Ensemble, Shelley Neal, the longtime executive director of the Multicultural Arts Center in East Cambridge, and Stephen Adelson from Teddy Shoes. Ultimately, I strongly believe that the arts are a central part of Cambridge's identity and are critical to building dynamic, fuller communities. The arts support our neighborhood and are a vehicle for economic security and growth. As a city councilor, I will continue to advocate for Cambridge's vibrant arts community. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Next, I would like to invite Jivan Sobrino Wheeler.
Thank you. My name is Jivan Sobrino Wheeler, and I'm serving my first term as a city councilor. Before starting on the city council, I worked at a nonprofit in Cambridge called the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, and I volunteered as a tenants' rights organizer with groups like City Life, Vida Urbana. I also grew up partly in subsidized housing, and like 2/3 of Cambridge residents, a few of us on the council, I'm a renter, which means I know what it's like to get a rent increase and wonder how much long I'll be able to keep living here, to look around at the cost to buy a home and see it completely out of reach for so many of the folks I know, including myself. The median cost for a one-bedroom apartment is $2,200 a month in Cambridge, and the median cost to buy is more than $800,000. And that has a huge impact on artists and musicians who are getting priced out of the city. And we're also losing affordable artist working spaces like EMF, which I live just around the corner from, for the same reasons. This term, I was the lead sponsor on an ordinance that I worked on with Vice Mayor Mallon and Councilor McGovern to allow musicians and artists to play live acoustic music and do performances at restaurants and other small businesses without having to go through the bureaucratic process of first applying to the city for a permit. I've also spent a lot of time working on housing and displacement issues, which have a huge impact on the arts community for the reasons I talked about. I helped pass an ordinance to create hundreds of new affordable homes in Cambridge. I've started the process on a Cambridge Community Land Trust, which would take some housing and community spaces off the speculative market and make it permanently affordable to help create more affordable homes and spaces for community, cultural, and arts organizations. And I've done work on implementing a stronger tenant protections, like a condo conversion ordinance with Mayor Siddiqui. I've also worked on the structural issues. The council had talked about allowing live acoustic music without a permit for years, but the License Commission and the solicitor hadn't thought it was worth pursuing. The structural issues with city government don't always get a lot of attention, but they have a huge role on some of these issues. I worked to get an amendment on the ballot that would start Cambridge's first charter review in more than 80 years with Councillor Nolan and Mayor Siddiqui. I've also worked with our state legislative delegation in a statewide coalition to push for legislation that would result in millions of dollars more in pilot payments, payment in lieu of taxes, from our two universities with multi-billion-dollar endowments. And that's funding that could play a huge role in supporting cultural and arts organizations in the city. I'm grateful for the chance to talk about some of my priorities and the work I've been able to do in this first term as a counselor, which has not been a normal first term by any means with the pandemic. And I hope to keep doing it as your counselor next term.
Thank you so much. Next, I would like to invite Paul Toner to respond to this first question. I'm just receiving notice that Paul is not able to join us today. In that case, I would like to invite Nicola Williams to respond to this question.
I'm unable to start the video. I'm unable to start the video. Can I? Okay. Great. Hi, I'm Nicola Williams. I am an immigrant, environmentalist, community organizer, and small business owner, as well as an arts advocate who've mentored hundreds of young adults and artists and business owners. I'm a producer of cultural events that are mission-driven, including the Boston Jerk Fest. And I was an early producer, world music producer at the Middle East when they first opened the downstairs concert hall. I also pay artists a fair compensation. I'm a nonprofit and business leader, and I serve on 4 Cambridge boards, including Community Arts Center, Cambridge Carnival International, and I'm the long-term organizer of the city's largest cultural festival, Cambridge Carnival. Cambridge Carnival is rooted in African traditions, and it's a festival that values and promotes cultural diversity through the annual carnival and parade. Glad to have it back this year and glad to be in Central Square. I've consistently promoted cultural diversity through the arts as an advocate. I also helped to launch the Cambridge Youth Steel Orchestra, a peer leadership program in collaboration with the Cambridge Community Center for the Arts, the Community Arts Center, and the teens advocating for a global vision, and Tempo International. Our Cambridge youth are learning how to play pan. And I'm also a performer, as you can see. I'm a percussion scratcher. So you'll see me at Carnival scratching anything that I could scratch. In my role as an arts advocate and award-winning producer of cultural events, I've collaborated with many arts organizations and arts projects, including participating in Opportunity through the Soul of Cambridge this past winter, Taste of Carnival, and I've also participated in activities with the Cambridge Community Center for the Arts. As we know, Cambridge is facing a host of challenges, including getting our entrepreneurs, our artists, our arts organizations back on track. During COVID, I spent a lot of time helping our nonprofit and our business owners within the community access PPP, EDIL, and providing technical assistance. It is something that I support that the city continue to do because it's going to take several years to recover from COVID. I'm also fighting for a more equitable, inclusive, and diverse community in Cambridge, and the arts is a way to continue to do that. Our museums and cultural institutions were hit really hard by COVID, and I would make sure that we prioritize our arts in Cambridge. It is a way to anticipate good cross-cultural communication, and is something that I am proud of in our city, and that makes us diverse and inclusive, and it's one of the most areas that is actually more inclusive in our city than any other area. So I'd like to continue to preserve that and also increase and sustain our funding for the arts. Thank you very much. My website is votenicola.com.
Thank you, Nicola. I would like to invite Quentin Zondervan to respond to this first question.
Thanks, Marissa. My name is Quentin Zondervan. I'm serving my second term on the Cambridge City Council. I came to the US as an immigrant when I was 15 years old in 1985 and moved to the Cambridge area in 1992 to study at MIT and settled down here and was first elected in 2017. One of the first things I did when I joined the council in 2018 was to fight the closure of the EMF building. Unfortunately, we were not successful, but it was a spirited fight, and I really supported the arts community that was there in the process. Along the way, over the last 2 terms, I've supported every single initiative on the arts, including the busking fees elimination and simplifying the permitting process that were mentioned earlier. And when the Cambridge Carnival was threatened with cancellation, I was the only councillor who really understood the importance of protecting that institution and fought really hard to protect it. And I was really proud to see it return to Cambridge this year, as Nicola mentioned, and hope that it will be able to continue for many, many more years to come. I'm also a supporter of all the arts initiatives that I can get my hands on, including the Central Square Theater, the Bridge Theater when it was in Cambridge, founded here, the Community Arts Center, Starlight, and many, many more. While I'm not a professional artist, I do have a lot of artistic hobbies, including color pencil drawing, which you can see an example behind me of a recent drawing that I made. Both my wife and my daughter are painters, and I support them in their artistic endeavors. And I hope to continue to be able to support the arts on the council with your #1 vote on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of the candidates for responding to that first question. I would now like to move on to our second question of the evening, which is, as a member of the Cambridge City Council, will you ensure the arts and culture sector is actively included in long-term citywide economic planning efforts? How specifically do you envision doing so? And first, I would like to invite Burhan Azim back to respond to this second question.
Thank you for the question. I think this is a really important question, and I want to tackle it in two pieces. One is the specifics of like how we can involve people in the planning process. I think we're at a very key turning point, particularly in Central Square at this moment. A lot of leases were turned over during the pandemic. A lot of sales were made as people were worried about the future and what would happen to their stores. This means that probably in the next year or so, we're the area and a lot of new stores pop up as those sales proceed. I think that this means that, City Hall is at a very important turning point in Central, because if we do nothing, then Central will be rebuilt in a way that probably refocuses more on office space and doesn't really have the new art spaces that we need to replenish the ones we've lost, like Green Street Studios, like Improv Boston. And so I think really focusing in on Central Square in the next 2 years, passing new zoning regulations that really encourages art spaces is going to be really, really critical and could have really positive direct outcomes in the next 2 years in terms of planning. Like if Central Square is going to be the next hub that really changes, then we should change it in a way that's far better and really lives up to this designation as a cultural district. For the second part of the question around like how do we get more people involved, I think right now we have a format in which only people who are free in the middle of the day or can attend endless meetings really participate in local politics. About 48,000 people usually participate in our elections, but in our local elections, as opposed to like gubernatorial presidential, only 20,000 people vote. So it's a much, much lower turnout. And of those 20,000, only 50 or 100 people really show up to City Hall. That means that a lot of important decisions are made at times when most people are not there. That's a lot of what my campaign has been focusing on getting more people engaged in the politics of local policy, getting them registered to vote and voting. Our campaign saw a 15% increase among young voters who we were talking in particularly last cycle, where the whole city saw a decrease in voter turnout about 10%, and also getting more people to City Hall and engaged in these committees and these organizations. I think fundamentally it kind of comes back to having these planning decisions being made with a broader definition of constituents, more than just the people who show up, but doing active outreach to making sure that all of our communities have input into the planning process and that we do plan for more art space in general. So I think that's all I have to say on that. And I'm really excited for the potentials that we'll have in Central Square, and hopefully we'll get more art spaces there soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Burhan. I would like to invite Dennis to respond.
Thank you. Again, it's Dennis. I'm the co-chair of the Finance Committee, and I sought out that position because I felt that much of the focus of what we do in the city was not as strong as it could be. For instance, the budget is supposed to be based on principles, the council's goals. We can simply make art and culture a prime goal. But here's the key. I've studied implementation strategies when I came to Cambridge in the 70s. And the goal is really simple, is yes, you got to act on the council level, but it's behind the scenes that all the work really happens. Talking to the manager, talking to the people in charge of the budget, Now, you have a collection of people on this discussion that would be a majority on the council. And it's just a matter of saying, we're going to do this. Now, it doesn't mean we're going to get everything the first year, but we build up. We're getting a new manager within less than a year. And one of the goals is to have, that some of us have, is to have someone that uses more of the available funds. $20 million more dollars in the budget, 20 million more, is $3 a week on the average residence tax-wise. It's peanuts. And if it means a ballot question, fine, but I really believe people would do it. Advancing more art in school, developing universal pre-K with a strong art component, which is an integral part of pre-K. My thesis was pre-kindergarten, and I studied a lot, and I know kids learn half of what they're ever going to learn before the age of 5. And art is a basis of that. Having more events in the squares. I participated badly in a salsa lesson in Harvard Square about a month ago, and the place was rocking. It was one of the best events ever. It's like Nicola's event through Central Square, except in a smaller scale. It's joy. Art and culture bring joy. We have to emphasize that. So Cambridge has an enormous reservoir of money. We use 2/3 of our taxing capacity. Boston, Somerville, and Brookline use 99.9%. Once again, I'm not saying we boosted up to 99.9%, but it seems to me $3 a week we can get from the average resident. I think it's art at every level. I've studied sculpture and after hours. In
Thank you,
fact,
Dennis. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
oh, it's too bad. I was going to show you a work of art another time. Take care.
Thank you. And welcoming back Robert to respond to the second question.
Excuse me. Thank you. First, I want to take the opportunity to highlight our ASL interpreter, Gilda. Collectively, we haven't had the opportunity to have one in our other forums, and I think this should be the status quo. So thank you. It's appreciated. As far as the questions, I'm going to answer the question in brief, and then I want to elaborate on it a little bit. In short, there was a part of the question which was what levels of funding specifically, and as far as throwing around numbers, I believe when I combed through the Cambridge Arts and Culture questionnaire, the expectation and desire was for $10 million of public money over the 2-year period. If that's the type of funding, if I'm elected city council, I would gladly commit to that with the idea that I'd be willing to go a lot higher. Okay, so let's expand on this a little bit. Oh, and as far as what I would do to ensure long-term citywide economic efforts, well, I'm sure that every candidate, they generally will say that they will have open dialogue with stakeholders, whether it's business-facing side, whether it's customers, whether it's the residents, whether it's the house. But minimally, I'll do that. My door is always open, so to speak. But I'm going to do a lot more. So let me explain. I want to support the arts as much as possible, and I'm going to bring up an example for what I believe is the goal we shall strive towards. In the late 80s until the early 90s, for a few years in the Netherlands, the central government created a pro-art policy that essentially allowed anyone who considered themselves to be an artist to file with the government. When filing, they received a stipend. This predated what we now would call a UBI, but at the time, the only requirement there is more or less a brokering a deal with the government, where they had to produce a gallery at the end of the year. There was no means testing for this, and there was no expectation that anything would be a particular masterpiece. The only incentive was that the individual could be creative and they didn't have to worry about a roof over their head or a meal in their stomach. This actually triggered a golden age of art, if you will, so much so that Dutch warehouses are still laden with artwork from 30 years ago. The simple action of enabling artists to not worry and stress about the banality of life led to beautiful, creative, and wonderful art to flourish. So when one imagines what makes society great, or what we all really desire from society, it's the freedom to pursue our passions without having to worry about our basic needs. So tying it back to our local perspective, we can do this somewhat, clearly not to the same extent, but somewhat. There's no reason not to have a similar Cambridge Artist Program, CAP, under which social housing and a stipend is created with a simple goal of enabling our youth, our creative geniuses, retirees as well, and any artists to be that can then produce art in a similar fashion. I'm the candidate who is pushing and promoting social spending to the max. I believe Dennis mentioned as far as our inability to spend, and he's absolutely right. Cambridge doesn't suffer from a lack of resources problem, it suffers from a lack of spending problem.
Thank you, Robert. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Okay, my website is robertexler.com, and I hope to earn your #1 vote November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Inviting Tanya Hicks back to respond to this second question.
Thanks, Marissa. I appreciate that. And I think that the short answer and succinct answer to this is yes, yes, and yes. I would definitely support short-term as well as long-term. I think artists need subsidized space. And I think they should be given money where they were pre-pandemic. And plus they should be given a cushion to that. So wherever they were pre-pandemic, I think there is enough surplus in our budget to allow for that. And again, we all agree that arts are critical and important to our mental and our physical health. And so I think they should be given money so they're at minimum to pre-pandemic status. And then I think they should be given, there should be a budget line where they're given a cushion, whether between 25 and 50%, whatever's affordable. And again, I would imagine quite a bit is affordable because Cambridge has a lot of surplus that has not been used. And so, sure, the short of the answer to this is yes, yes, and yes. I would definitely support long-term where they're part of the long-term budget of Cambridge government. Because again, we all agree that without the arts, we are at a loss for creativity and for just good mental and physical health because it contributes to it all. And so thank you for your time.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Mallon, I'd like to pass it on to you.
Thanks, Marissa. The arts are a huge key to a strong economic recovery. There's no doubt about it. Pre-pandemic, the arts brought hundreds of millions of dollars in economic activity to Cambridge and were responsible for over 6,000 jobs right here in our city. That was with almost no financial investment in the arts by our city. In order to have a full economic recovery for our residents, our small local retail and restaurants, we must fully invest in the arts. $10 million per year for the next 2 years seems like an achievable and reasonable target, and it can be reached with strong public and private partnerships and investment. This sector was woefully underfunded pre-pandemic, and we have a tremendous opportunity to reinvest in this critical sector with ARPA funding, additional commitments from the city coffers, and investment from the private sector and university partners. We need to be infusing additional dollars into our cultural district, into our annual grant funding, as well as targeting additional art spaces and other opportunity like the successful Starlight Square to provide more space for arts to happen. Hiring a director of arts and cultural planning to drive the larger plan with multiple stakeholders on how to implement the recommendations of the Arts Task Force, such as an artist in residence program modeled after the successful program in New York City, updating zoning to incentivize arts-related uses, identify and prioritize funding to purchase dedicated art spaces, and more is a critical component to addressing this urgent need in our community. As I mentioned, the arts is an economic driver in the city and needs to be included in all aspects of economic planning. That's why the position originally concepted by the Arts Task Force as an Arts and Cultural Director has now changed to an Arts and Cultural Planning Director. We know that this role needs to be at the table during all planning and zoning discussions to ensure that arts are in the forefront of each of these conversations. I'm committed to ensuring that that position is hired as soon as possible to begin planning for a successful economic return of the arts and to seek opportunities to strengthen this critical sector of our community. As far as the relation to the community benefit side, as a result of my advocacy during the Cambridge side mall rezoning, the arts is about to get $500,000 for arts-related uses. The new Biomed building at 585 3rd Street will have a large designated art space and a commitment for an operator who deeply understands the needs of the arts community. There are ways to incorporate the arts into rezonings and pilot payments. We just need policymakers to advocate for the arts in meaningful ways to affect real and lasting change. I hope that I've earned your #1 vote on November 2nd, so I can continue being the arts counselor and advocate and champion on the Cambridge City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I would like to invite Mark McGovern to respond to the second question.
Great, thank you. And I'll again sort of refer back to the Mayor's Arts Task Force that I launched, and when I was mayor and was chaired by current Vice Mayor Mallon. That effort was one of the only efforts in quite some time, anyone's sort of memory from what I was told, where we brought together arts organizations, individual artists, nonprofits, city leaders and decision makers, policymakers, all to the table to really develop a strategy, a plan, short and long-term recommendations to support the arts community. And we started acting on those, and then, COVID hit and threw everything, into a tailspin. So again, sort of bringing that conversation back, making sure that experts are at the table to talk about what they need and how we can work together to make sure that the arts community is getting what it needs. That was sort of the purpose of that task force, and we need to continue to do that. Councillor Carlone had mentioned about making arts and culture an actual stated goal for the City Council. I would absolutely support that. We haven't looked at our goals in a couple of years. Again, COVID kind of messed things up, but we need to go back and revisit that. And I think given how important arts and culture are to our community, that needs to be its standalone stated goal of the council and the city to make sure that we are supporting artists and art organizations. I think we need to invest in public art as well. I worked with the BID and the city to help get some funding for the murals that are on the sides of buildings in Central Square, because I think having public art and art that is accessible to everyone, whether they can or cannot afford to pay for it, is incredibly important in our community. And so I would want to continue to support public art installations. As Robert had mentioned, your organization has been advocating for a $10 million investment. I would certainly support that. And I think, that is something that, if it needs to be more money than that, I think that's something we have to talk about and think about. We do have $65 million from the federal government. There are some restrictions on how we can spend that money, but I think we could certainly look at investing in art as a way of mental health support and creating a stronger community. And I also want to say that, I know I'm not an expert in this. I'm not, my kids are very artistic and have gone to school for that. I haven't. So bringing you to the table to help me better understand what it is you need, I can then shuffle that through the political process, as I always have, to make sure that you get the support that you need. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome back Joe McGurk.
Excuse me. Hi, Joe again. I think that I'd like to build on a few things that other folks have said. I think that the funding level should be the 20 million over the 2 years for sure. As a few others have pointed out, we're going to get that through 65 million or more through ARPA. And we also have our own city coffers that we can tap. So in the short term, I think that is the answer. Long term, I think that there's a few things that we should discuss. But ultimately, one of those is housing. No matter what we do, we still have to create housing for the folks who can't make enough money to live here. I think through the housing platform that I have, we could include Lift Up Artists. I do think that I need to learn more about how we can include them, and I'll be asking you guys for that. But if you want to see my housing priorities, you can go to the website, joemcgurkforcambridge.com. I also think that there's a wage gap and a wealth gap in our city. I think we have to address that. Somebody pointed out that visual arts and performing arts are also part of this. I think that we must address the gap between white collar workers and blue collar workers and those people who perform in our cities. And one of the proposals I have is a wage board that would be able to address wage standards, health standards, safety standards. And ultimately, I think that there is an intrinsic link between our restaurant and bar community and our arts community as well, or parts of our arts community as well. I think that strengthening those two communities is something we really have to do to make our city, to continue to make our city the wonderful place that it is. I don't have a lot more to say about this. I really do need to learn more about it, but I still hope you'll consider me for your #1 vote in November.
Thank you, Joe. Welcoming back Patty Nolan to respond to the second question.
Thank you. I think I forgot to introduce myself last time. I'm Patty Nolan, and like everyone else on this call, would love your #1 vote starting from now through November 2nd. I want to start with something that has been a hallmark of everything I've done, which is no matter what we do in the arts, and we absolutely need to and can do and should be doing more, we also have to monitor the impact of our work, so that we often in Cambridge, we start programs, we have all these programs, and then we don't get the reports on what's working, why is it working, why is it not working, so then we can adjust course. There's been a number of areas, including related to the arts, that we should understand. Was the $600,000 dispensed through the various funds, was that enough? Was that not enough? Was it something that actually helped people? If so, how? We just have to understand that. Understand we had been funding some of the arts through our hotel receipts, and yet those are way, way down. So we have to reshift and think how we're going to fund the arts through other programs. So one thing that I've done in every area that I approach on the council is ensure that when we do things, we have to monitor and oversee. So specifically to some of the arts, we have to recognize first what has been recognized, the importance of this to our economy and to our emotional well-being. I remember when Olivia D'Ambrosio Scanlon, who now does a fabulous program in Worcester, I've seen her play, ran in 2017. She helped educate me about how critically important it was to do more for the funding for the arts. We do a tremendous amount in Cambridge, and yet we can do so much more. Luckily, some of the other candidates have already mentioned some things on my notes, like housing for artists. It's just like teachers. If we want artists and teachers or anyone else to be able to afford to live here, we need to have housing specifically for them. As Vice Mayor Mallon mentioned, the Constellation Theater in Biomed development is incredible for the local arts community. We've asked for years for space, and it not only will provide space, but it will provide programming, and not just one theater space, but a whole range of work space for artists. And as has also been said, I just want to make sure I get it in there, that we have to remember that for me, the arts is a huge range of things. It's the buskers, it's music, it's theater. It's also artists at home who may be painting iPad art. It's woodworkers, it's singers, it's a range of singers. It could be individual, it could be street musicians at the Honk Festival. There's just this incredible breadth and depth of diversity within the arts that we, and I'm sure I've left some out, that we have to remember to include in these conversations as we move forward. Because the question really is, how do we make sure that we include so many of these different players? It is our job. We have started, and a lot of the work from the mayor's task force that Mark McGovern had started and Alana Mallon had led, I have built on all those things that we've talked about, those policies that have passed have come out of that. And I will say, we also need to include the universities. MIT and Harvard just literally gained billions of extra dollars on their endowment. Let's make sure that those are used by this city to more fund the arts. And one last thing, we have to pay attention to individual artists, many of whom don't understand, aren't included, and haven't even had an opportunity to be included in some of these wonderful programs because they don't hear about it. Thank you.
I would like to invite Franz Pierre back to respond to this second question.
Hello, everybody. Hello. It's Franz Pierre again. My website is www.votefrance.com. What I would like to say about that is I would like to continue to build and have events focused on the youth in the community. I understand the importance of it to build a safe place for artists to go and express themselves. I understand it's not that easy to find a place. Growing up as a musician in the city of Cambridge, it wasn't easy trying to book gigs, especially at the Middle East. So I believe. So a question is pretty much, why don't we have something like the Apollo Theater in Cambridge, since we have so much talent and artistry there. I would like to focus on, like I said, building infrastructures for places like that, because it does bring jobs and internships for kids. It's a healthy place where kids can come and learn. We can also host events where we can actually bring down big artists, such as Jay-Z or things like that, because Boston doesn't really have stadiums or theaters to actually hold these people in. So I think that would be a great place to start, even having a movie theater in Central Square. I think we were kind of going away from the art, besides Graffiti Alley and Starlight. I think those things are awesome, but I think there's a lot more that we could be doing. Like I said, in other cities, these kids are flourishing in the movie scene, they're flourishing in the music scene, the art scene. So I think Cambridge could be definitely number one at the top of the scene with them. I just think we just need to have some focus to it and have some people, like I said, that actually been in positions like that can connect these kids to certain artists at the top, so they can actually, build the confidence and believe they can do these things as well. Also, I wanted to host seminars where we can have, label execs, A&R producers, beat makers, movie producers, songwriters, and dancers come down and actually, teach our youth on like a monthly basis. And that's it. Name's Franz Pierre, www.votepierre.com. My first year running. I would love your #1 vote.
Thank you so much, Franz. Welcome
Thank you.
back, Theodora.
Thanks, Marissa. Hi, everyone. So the arts drive enormous economic activity in Cambridge. The Arts and Economic Prosperity 5 study provides evidence that the nonprofit arts and culture sector in Cambridge is an enormous driver of economic activity, one that generates $174.8 million in total economic activity. This spending, $119.8 million by nonprofit arts and cultural organizations, and an additional $55 million in event-related spending by their audiences, supports 6,129 full-time equivalent jobs, generates $98.3 million in household income to local residents, and delivers $13.6 million in local and state government revenue. The economic benefits of the arts in Cambridge are substantial, and they must be protected and preserved. As the pandemic continues to negatively impact the arts businesses and nonprofits in Cambridge, we must recognize the importance of the arts. ARPA relief funding should be allocated to our organizations, and protective equipment and measures should be added to the annual budget. As a city councilor, I will actively engage the arts community to better understand how the city can support the sector and identify the projects and funding most needed to ensure a complete and swift recovery. And I will ensure that the arts and culture sector is actively included in long-term citywide economic planning efforts. The arts are a crucial component of the human experience and serve to enrich the culture and the community around them. All of Cambridge's neighborhoods have unique and diverse stories to tell, and artists to tell these stories visually and orally. We can and must do better to treat our artists as stakeholders in city decisions. As a city councilor, I will push for a real community dialogue with our artists to form an action plan for the arts that truly addresses their needs. Last, I will commit to supporting the sector through broader city funding mechanisms, such as pilot payments from museums and universities and the Community Benefits Fund from developers. My commitment is to the arts and its importance to our community, not only as a source of revenue, but also as a source of human experience and development. Ultimately, as I noted before, I strongly believe that the arts are a central part of Cambridge's identity and are critical to building dynamic, full communities. The arts support our neighborhoods and are a vehicle for economic security, activity, and growth in our city. As a city councilor, I will ensure that the arts and culture sector are actively included in long-term citywide economic planning efforts. Thank you so much, and I too hope you will consider me for your #1 vote this November. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Theodora. Welcoming back Jeevan to answer this second question.
Thank you. I've been working on expanding citywide planning and zoning processes in my first term on the city council. to be more comprehensive and inclusive. And arts and culture organizations should be an active participant in those processes. Right now, the City Council often ends up spending hours discussing specific zoning petitions about different parcels in Cambridge and trying to push for more funding for the arts and culture organizations. And we're sometimes successful, but it's in a piecemeal fashion. Especially in areas like Alewife and Kendall, discussing specific parcels, and it feels like we're playing a game of chicken on the City Council over different development proposals, and often they're not quite good enough, but we don't want to walk away with nothing and get no benefits for on transit or on arts and culture spaces or on housing. I've been pushing for a more proactive approach to planning and zoning for what we'd like to see both citywide and in specific neighborhoods to make sure we get more housing, better transit connections, and more affordable arts and community spaces. And by doing this, we can make sure that arts and culture organizations that have really been anchors in the city for a long time don't get priced out of Cambridge. The city right now is also in the process of hiring a new city manager who's going to start next year. And the manager directs the city's planning department, has a really important role to play here. That hiring process is going to be one of the biggest priorities for the city council next term. And I'll be pushing for to find someone who's going to prioritize this kind of comprehensive planning that centers, a broader community engagement and outreach process too. And just one other sort of note on this is I've been attending the Old Cambridge Baptist Church in Mid-Cambridge for the last several years, which is home of the Jose Mateo Ballet Theater. And it's a great way as a church to bring a cultural organization into the community and find an affordable home for a dance organization in quite a large space. And I think the city can do more to facilitate those kinds of connections and find affordable homes for arts organizations as well. I'm grateful for the chance to talk about the city's role in arts and culture and to have this forum. I'm Jeevan Sobrino Wheeler, and I hope to keep representing you as your city councilor.
Thank you, Jeevan. I would like to welcome back Nicola Williams to respond to this second question.
Okay, can you start my video, please? Thank you. So, COVID-19 pandemic has hit our arts organizations, our museums, the cultural presentations, the producers, the hardest. As part of our COVID economic recovery plan, which I propose, I do support the funding of $10 million annually over the next 2 years, and also technical assistance for artists who are also businesses. Sometimes artists don't think they are, but they are. So we need to incorporate our community partners to be more arts friendly. For example, renting space. The insurance can be onerous and outrageous, actually. The insurance requirements for events on some of our properties. So we, as a city, need to lean on our corporate community partners to be more friendly in that factor. In terms of funding, other areas I would like to advocate for, we have currently the 1% for the arts ordinance in Cambridge. I, in fact, think we need to make it 2%. But the city has not really fully utilized this 1% of the arts fund. So I would like to see it increase, and not only for public arts activities, but performance arts, artist lofts, artist studios, rehearsal space. Let's just be creative about that ordinance. We need to expand opportunities for funding for the arts, not only with our own funding, but to seek out national funding to leverage. Learn from other cities. There's actually a low-hanging fruit with the Boston and there is actually a tourism bid that was approved by the city of Boston and city of Cambridge that will bring in millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. It's an assessed fee of 1.5% that the hotels are allowed to earmark towards tourism. I'd like to see the arts specifically be included in that. London wanted to be the cultural capital of the world. And so I was hired as one of the team members to help the Notting Hill Carnival, the largest festival in London that generated 3,000 jobs, 94 million pounds, and attracted 1 million people. What London did was they did the research, they came up with a plan, they hired the experts, and developed a cultural economic development plan, which I helped to put together. We are facing over the next 4 to 5 years. It's going to take 4 to 5 years to recover from this period. And in order for our arts to bounce back, we need the financial support to do so successfully. Why not have Cambridge be the cultural capital of the Northeast or even the United States? We have so much to offer, but we have just barely scratched the surface. As a counselor, I will put arts as one of my priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, I would like to invite Quentin Zondervan to respond to this final question.
Thanks, Marissa. I got some reports that I was barely audible last time, so I just wanted to check if this is better.
Yes, that seems better.
Great, thank you so much. One of the disadvantages of going last, of course, is that all the good ideas have been taken. But what I do want to emphasize is that the council does have a lot of power over the budget. We can make suggestions and we can vote the budget up or down if it doesn't meet our requirements. We also, because of COVID, have received $65 million in relief funding from the Biden administration. And as Councilor Carlone mentioned earlier, that is going to be dispersed over the next year or two, and the council will have significant input over how that takes place. So I definitely plan to advocate strongly for some of that money to go towards the arts, because as has been mentioned many times previously, our local arts businesses have suffered significantly from the pandemic. I do want to take some time to address some of the questions I've seen in the chat. There was a question about rent control. I strongly support rent control and always have. I've been to the State House to testify many times in support of rent control. Unfortunately, we do need to change the state law in order to be able to do that in Cambridge. So we have to advocate with our state legislature to get that passed. And there was also a question on the Winter Street building. I've been working with community members on that building and how to best utilize it, because it is owned by the city and currently sitting vacant and has been vacant for several years. And that is a real opportunity to leverage that space for the community, including for artists. I'm also working with Santos at 286 Broadway, which is an interesting space that has come up for artists to sell some of their work and to have performances and to meet and work together. And that space is very precarious right now, and I've been working with Santos for the last several months to see if we can find a way to make that more secure and more stable as a space for artists and art-based businesses. And then as part of Green Cambridge, we have a wildlife education program.
I'm sorry, Quentin, that's all the time we have.
Educate our children.
Well, that concludes our questions for this forum. I would like to thank all the candidates for all of your time, focus, and responses this evening. As a reminder, you can learn more about each candidate and see their full responses to the Create the Vote Cambridge 2021 Art and Culture Questionnaire at our landing page on Mass Creative. The link to that is in the chat. And we have noted all of the questions during this forum, and we will share them with all the candidates and let all attendees know when and where you can access their responses. Additional thank yous to the Create the Vote Cambridge Working Committee members and to all of you, the attendees, for joining us this evening. I'd like to remind everyone that this forum is a step in a long-term advocacy effort towards supporting arts and culture in Cambridge, and we need all of you to get out and vote on November 2nd so we can keep the momentum going. Thank you all for supporting the arts and culture in Cambridge, and we look forward to continuing the conversation soon. Thanks so much.